When assessing a new Amazon, what are the data points that you normally look into?
That's a good sign that you can, have success in Amazon as well.
What do you mean by scale on Amazon?
So the way that I view scaling is kind of like a systematic approach.
So what's the difference between those two listings in terms of PPC structure?
Pause the keywords when they pop up, but you can't stop it.
We have sub and save on Amazon. Do you use any other techniques to retarget them?
Ecom Squeezed podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Ecom Squeezed. I am a host, Sebastian, founder of Retail-Outsource. And today we got John from Online Brand Growth joining us. John has been helping brands crush it on Amazon for over 8 years. From fixing broken listing to scaling product into category leaders. He runs a top-tier agency and also operates his own brand. So he's deep into all this experience. He have experienced it all right. Today, he's diving into the real growth on Amazon, not just sales, but more strategy, better margins, and more long-term wins. So let's dive into the show. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you, Sebastian, for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Great. So for the viewers, I have explained a lot. So if you can just add some more bits. How do you end up start this agency? You have your own brand as well, right? So what are the logic behind it?
Yes. So I started my e-commerce journey all the way back in 2012, doing some work as an affiliate. In 2015 is when I found Amazon and when I launched my private label skincare brand. 2015, as you know, was kind of like the heyday of Amazon. A lot of things were working. So we pretty much found immediate success as soon as we launched on the platform. It was like the first year, I think we did, first full year, we did about $500,000. And then the second full year, we were already above $1 million. So it really just took off right away. And so through the experience of kind of growing my own brand, learning about like who I need to hire, what actions I need to take on a regular basis to grow my business. Through that experience, I started doing some consulting for other brands. Had some pretty big successes, one of which was a baby brand that we actually grew the revenue by 30 times, and they were able to exit to an aggregator just in 2021. And then more recently, in the past 2.5 years, we've developed into a full service agency where we have a full team now. We are managing 12 brands at this moment, about 30 million in annual revenue. We have a full team ranging from catalog management, logistics operations, SEO, and listing optimization, graphic design, and then PPC, of course, and strategic growth consulting. So now we're kind of handling all aspects of Amazon for our partner brands and still managing my own brand to this day.
Great. I can imagine the beauty should be really competitive, right, on Amazon. Compared to now, if you launch it now, it will be like crazy. On 13, was a good time, I assume, right?
Yeah, for sure. At the beginning when we launched, we had access to certain strategies and tactics that a lot of the big brands did not have access to. So we were like way ahead of them. And then over time, Amazon democratized the way that reviews work and everything like that. So it's definitely a lot harder today to launch a brand than it was in 2015. No question about it. But still very doable.
Yes, true. So when assessing a new Amazon seller, what are the main operational or main KPIs that you look into to check if they can scale it, keeping the margin, not diluting, affecting that margin, but it's a balance, right? So what are the data points that you normally look into?
To determine like if we think a new seller is going to be successful, I would say one, that they have like good margins, like you said, good unit. There's no way to outrun poor unit economics. Right? So you need to have good, strong unit economics. You need to have, I think these days, something proprietary or something that's really adding value to the market. You're not able to just launch like a Me Too product at a price point that's not superior. And I would also add something that's not going to be cannibalized by Chinese sellers. There's another thing that's really, one of the things we're looking at these days, because so many of the manufacturers over there have begun selling directly. So, that's a real challenge as well. And then we'll also look at like what team the seller has, what resources they have available, those sort of data points. Oh, and a big one is if they've had success in another channel, right? So if we have somebody who's new to Amazon with a brand, but they have success in retail or they have success in e-commerce, that's a good sign that you can, have success in Amazon as well because you have product market fit established.
Those are nice, good points, John. And when we say scale on Amazon, what are you mentioning? What is scale? Is that velocity, or is that margin, or is that market share? What do you mean by scale on Amazon? Means
Yeah, the way that we're very focused on contribution margin, which is basically the net profit on Amazon, right? So when I think of scaling, it's definitely not in terms of revenue, right? Because at a certain point, when you try to push, for example, PPC too far, you start diminishing your profitability, right?
Yeah.
So the way that I view scaling is kind of like a systematic approach to launching products, getting them to as far as you can get them to profitably, finding that equilibrium, and then doing it again and again and again and again. And then managing that, business with, the right operational tactics, the right pay-per-click tactics, the right logistics practice to kind of maximize the profitability of like each product group. So that's the way I think about it. And I think that products do have a natural equilibrium of how much they're going to sell. So you can like launch a product and maybe you're doing like giveaways or you're doing really aggressive PPC and you might be able to push it up like really high, but eventually a product is going to find its equilibrium, like where it naturally belongs, and you can't outrun that equilibrium. That's where it's going to be.
Yeah, that's very true. Most of the people when they launch it, they do all those stuff, and they try to match that initial 3 months of sales going forward as well. And so you're right, it will come back where it belongs at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And when a client comes to you, I know you are full service agency, right? So you have all the different departments within that PPC and everything. So in order to audit, what are the main areas that you will normally look into? Let's say, established seller, they have like a million turnover per month.
Yeah, so the main areas that we're looking at during an audit, in no particular order, one is going to be PPC, of course. We're going to look to just make sure that the campaigns are structured well. We like to look at the SQP data to basically make sure that they see what opportunities might be available, what gaps there are in their PPC, right? So if their conversion rate is better than the market conversion rate and they're not ranking and not pushing a particular keyword, that's an opportunity. And conversely, if their conversion rate is worse than the market and they're still pushing on that keyword, is probably waste. So that's like what we're looking at with PPC. A listing optimization, of course. So we'll plug in their listings to some third-party software and try to figure out if there's gaps in the listings that they could be improved. We'll look also at like the inventory age report to see how they're handling their logistics and operations, making sure that they're in that target range. If it's like small and light products at FBA of like 90 to 120 days in stock, they don't have anything that's there for like a year that's sitting there with long-term storage fees accumulating, so make sure they're in a good range there. Also, like the reimbursements, we'll have a look to see if there's like any reimbursements available that they didn't know about. We'll have a look at deals to see if they've like ran deals during Prime Day, if they run lightning deals on a regular basis. Those are like, I would say, the main things that we're looking at during an audit.
Yeah, you mentioned about search query performance, right? And to find the gap, you mentioned that. So how do you find the gap using search query performance report?
Yeah, so basically there's a way that you could download the data in a search query performance report to see your conversion rate versus your competitor conversion rate on a keyword by keyword basis. So like you can, what we do is draw out like a heat map to show like here's the opportunities, right? And here's the ones where you are overspending. Because for me, PPC, like the goal of PPC is to rank organically, right? PPC is a tool. And so if you're just spending money on PPC and you're not achieving that, is very unlikely that it's profitable, like that little portion of it. So, those work hand in hand. Another, metric that we like to look at is the ratio of organic to PPC. So like a very, very healthy ratio is like 70% organic, 30% PPC. Not everybody can achieve that, but that's like really ideal. But if it's like the inverse, for example, like 70% PPC, 30% organic, that would be usually a sign that they're overdoing the PPC.
True. You mentioned some great points over there. And with the nine algorithm and the traditional keyword strategy, right? And we have Cosmo now, intent-based search. It's picking up. Means the one data that didn't have was are people using it or not? So I think recently I saw it on one of the WhatsApp groups saying, okay, teenagers and everything, they started using Rufus to find products on Amazon. So what's your take on it? Because we have the traditional one and we have the new one, Cosmo. So how the sellers manage both those?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think to do good listing optimization these days, you need to speak to both the humans and the robots, right? You need to speak to the AI, right? So a couple ways we achieve that. Like when we're designing the image stack, running it through, first a tool like VOC.ai that can help you identify the target avatar, like using, reviews and stuff like that. So start by identifying the target avatar, do your images, and then you could run them through Cosmo and Rufus to like check them to see if it knows like what they are. And then another way that you need to speak to the AI is through the back end of the listing. I think a lot of sellers fail to do that. So we all know that we need to create an image stack. We need to create a title, bullet points, description, and ideally A+. But there's many, many fields in the back end of a flat file. And a lot of those fields, you're informing the AI ahead of time what exactly the product is, who exactly it's for. So you have to pay attention to all these fields, like the target age, for example. Like that's a good one. Like it's looking at that. So over time, AI will, the way like you're giving your listing at first and you want to help the AI as much as possible understand what the product is so it's cheapest to learn. But over time, it's going to learn what your product is and who the target customer is based on the conversion data. So it's like you have to do as good of a job up front as you can to push the AI in the right direction so its learning curve is shortened, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. It's a lot of people, you're 100% right. They ignore the technical part of the listing.
Yeah.
You focus on title, bullet points, the image stack. That's it. They ignore, for example, the one that you mentioned, age. It's so important, right, to add those information. And what's your technical approach to balance, indexing, right? We can use Helium 10 to check the indexing and versus ranking across bullet points, titles, back and search term, for example.
So we use like Data Dive. That's kind of like the main third-party tool that we use for both the listing building and like the tracking. So we're just looking at it all the time. If something is de-indexing that was previously indexing, often that's a sign that something is, broken, right? Something went wrong. Like maybe your browse node and your category got broken and is misaligned now. So it's something that needs to be fixed. We're finding a lot now that trigger keywords are, becoming more and more of an issue, that Amazon will decide, even after a listing has been live for a year, that certain keywords are bad. And so they'll all of a sudden suppress, like you were ranking number 20 for something and now is nowhere, like no indexing. That's usually a sign that like something is broken in the catalog or some trigger word exists, where if you fix those from a catalog point of view, a listing point of view, it'll fix the ranking. Whereas something that like if it drops from 20 to 25, that's usually more of like a conversion rate issue. Maybe you got a couple bad reviews in, maybe a competitor is running a sale. Maybe your PPC got a little too broad and you need to bring it back. So like those are the signs of like what to do based on how the ranking issue.
Right. And I assume because you have Data Dive, you should be using heat map, right? Data Dive heat map to track individual keywords.
Yeah, exactly.
And so let's assume that one of the keyword is high traffic and it's ranking as well, but suddenly the conversion dropped. The ranking is still there, but the conversion dropped. So what's your framework to troubleshoot in that situation?
Yeah, so if the conversion dropped on that keyword and it didn't totally de-index, then It's not a catalog issue. It's not a trigger keyword issue. It's going to be an issue with either your competitors are running a deal or changed their price. Maybe a new competitor entered the market. Maybe your price or something went up, like something changed about your offer. It could be something that changed about the page, like maybe an image got removed, maybe a bullet point got removed or something like that. So those are things that could have an impact on the conversion rate. Or maybe your PPC got a little too aggressive and too broad, right? Because your PPC will change the conversion rate mix. Like if you're too aggressive with a PPC, it drives the conversion rate down, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's a very good point, John. And with data that we have listing optimizer, right? That you
Yeah.
can use different variant like Cosmo plus Rufus or Cosmo or traditional optimization. So what's your take on it in terms of, which one you normally tend to use for data dive?
I'm sorry, the video cut out there for a second. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. So on data dive, we have listing optimizer, right? So when we select listing optimizer, we have three options. So we have Cosmo plus Rufus, Cosmo, and traditional option. So we can select any one of those, right? So in your opinion, which one works better?
We are using the traditional and we do the Cosmo and Rufus separate. But yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on that.
Okay, great. And let's take an example. So can you share an example where the sale for that specification was declined, maybe for various reasons? So what are the things that you normally look into?
Yeah, so I actually created a post on X earlier this year, like kind of a revenue rescue map where you can see look at this, if this, then that. But it's like, I would say everything we talked about so far from a catalog point of view, I would look at, those things, right? So nothing's changed in your page at all. Nothing is changed about the category. Nothing's changed about the competitive landscape or your price point. And then if all that, you still haven't figured anything out yet, I would look at the branded searches. Has anything changed with branded searches? Has anything changed if you have outside traffic? Has anything changed in that mix, right? So let's say you're a big brand that was running a lot of Facebook ads and then you're changing your agency and you pause them for a little while. That's going to affect your Amazon performance. So before we start to panic, the first thing to monitor is your BSR, right? So your BSR, the bestseller ranking, which is in the middle of the page, that is your metric to determine how you're doing versus your competitors, right? So if the BSR is the same and your sales are down, it means that everybody in that category, the sales are down, right? So while it's still painful, at least there's nothing unique about your situation. But if your BSR is rising relative to your competitors, something is wrong specifically about your mix of things. So yeah.
Great. I want to ask some question about PPC. So let's say in terms of structure, how do you structure for the PPC campaigns for a new seller or a new listing versus a listing that's quite established and starting a new campaign? So what's the difference between those two listings in terms of PPC structure?
Yeah, I'll kind of speak from a high level here. The way that we view PPC is phases of a life cycle. Okay, so you have phase one, which is a new product, and that's what we call the launch phase. Okay, and during the launch phase, the goal is the KPIs is basically to keep increasing the top line sales and to keep increasing the ranking, right? So that's what you're looking at. Once those kind of plateau and they're not going any further, we bring it into what we call phase two, our trimming phase, where we're going to cut the fat, all the stuff that's not working, let that continue running for a little while. And the goal of phase two is to get the TACOS, the total advertised cost of sale, in between 8 to 12%, something like that. Okay. Let that run for a little bit. Then we pause for re-optimization, which is another listing optimization at that point based on the SQP data. Because when you're doing a listing first, you are making educated guesses, okay, about what keywords are going to convert, right? You're doing your best to anticipate. But then after you've been live for some time, you have real world data of what's converting and what's not converting versus the market. Okay. So then we pause for the re-optimization where we're going to basically remove keywords from the listing that didn't work at all, add some keywords that were outperforming the market, and basically just try to enhance the listing a little bit. Then we move to phase 3, which is like trying to push those keywords that we are outperforming the market, right? Because if you're outperforming the market in conversion rate, like you should be ranking in like the top 5 or top 10, you know? So you need to be pushing those and, pulling back on the ones that are not. And then the final phase is again, like what we call maturity. And maturity, you want to bring it back again to 8 to 12%. Right? Because once your product's in maturity, there's really no more, like you don't want to keep pushing it forever. You want to just turn that one into a cash cow, okay? Maximize the profit and move to the next one. This is actually a topic that is frustrating for me because there's some softwares like Perpetua, for example, is one where it's like constantly in growth mode, right? It's adding new keywords like all the time, and you cannot stop it. Right? You can pause the keywords when they pop up, but you can't stop it. So we don't like that because we want to basically, in that maturity phase, we want to say like, stop. You found all the keywords that you're going to find. This product is now a cash cow and we're focusing on the others. So that's the way we like to view it. An exception to that is if you have like a very giftable product, like maybe in Q4, you want to keep it in discovery, right? Because you don't want to miss like a new keyword that's popping up for your giftable product. So that could be an exception. But with most products, you want to kind of at some point view it as like a cash cow.
Great. And on the phase 4, do you adjust the pricing in any way? Like a small margins, 5%, 5%. Adding the price. Do you play around with prices on the
Yeah,
phase
I
4?
would say if you should be testing prices, whenever you do change a price up or down, it would put you back into phase 1 or phase 3. Like it's a new testing mode, right? Because that's going to change the dynamic a lot. And maybe certain keywords that you were not converting on previously, maybe now you will with the price change. So I think that you should, price change, like at the beginning, you should be testing. And if you want to test later, that's fine. But then you need to move it backward and test again.
Yeah. And for Amazon PPC, we have auto campaigns, manual, ASIN targeted, sponsored brands. There are plenty of them, right? So in terms of, for example, one of your client came to say, okay, I have 1,000 per day budget, $1,000. How do you allocate it? I know there are a lot of variables, but in general, how does the budget allocation look like?
Yeah, I can't speak to the like the exact type of campaign mix that we're doing from the beginning because we have like a PPC managers who are determining those things. But I will say that we always focus on sponsored products at the beginning because sponsored products are like, tried and true. They're delivering like the best ROI. So the way that we do it is during those launch phases, it's all sponsored products. And then, maybe in like phase 3 is like when you're starting to introduce those sponsor brands, or like month 3 or 4, you could introduce sponsor brands and sponsored display. But I like to definitely phase those out in order from like the highest ROI to, the lowest ROI.
And in terms of bidding on PPC, is there any bidding strategies that you normally use or any software that you normally use to manage the client account at the moment?
We're using Scale Insights for that because it
I
has
heard that.
more control than Perpetua. So we switched a while ago to Scale Insights, and we've found that to be a good switch.
Great.
And it has features where you can automate bidding, but we do that on some ASINs, and then others we do manual.
Great. And we have some softwares for AI PPC managing, right? What's your take on those? Have you tried it? If you tried it,
Yeah, I think again, like Perpetua is very based on AI. We've had in the past, there was one several years ago, but yeah, they can go out of control sometimes, So we like to. I think we're still not at a time where you can totally just rely on AI. I think at some point in the future we will be there, where you do not need like a human, but right now you definitely need, human management, human oversight. Otherwise, you'll find some things where you look at it, you're like, what? Like, what was it thinking type of thing. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
true. So I want to ask some more questions about fulfillment operations and inventory. So with Amazon, it's quite tricky, right? It's unpredictable with the new stock limits, and so how do you forecast inventory with high confidence? What are the things that you normally?
Yeah, so we're using stocked for our own inventory management. And basically, we try to get like a 30, 60, 90-day view of sales. And then also try to black out any abnormal periods. So like if there was a stock out or something like that, you want to block that out from your averages. If there was like a big Prime Day or something, maybe you want to block that out from your averages. But yeah, you do your best to estimate. And as I mentioned earlier, like we like to target for small and light items. The brand should target like 90 to 120 days of stock, in our opinion. And for medium-sized items, maybe closer to like 60 to 75 days. And then oversized items, we're usually recommending like FBM, actually, unless they are like really fast sellers, because oversized items are a lot more challenging with FBA. So we try to aim for those targets as much as possible.
Great. You mentioned about FBM, right? And oversized item. For example, if it's a small and light item, and if they have stock on FBA, in that case, would you recommend to that seller saying, okay, it's better to have backup like FBM or from 3PL shipping? Do you recommend anything like that?
Yeah, I think it's always good to have a backup of FBM. I mean, the ideal scenario is to have FBA going and have an FBM SKU behind it, because what happened, we've seen throughout history, stuff happens with FBA, right? We've seen like, COVID, we've seen, times around Prime Day where they get overwhelmed. And so there have been times historically where you're thankful to have the FBM as like a backup option. So yeah, I strongly recommend it. And again, with oversized items, we've found with some of our like larger catalog sellers that are doing all FBA, like the oversized items can often be unprofitable in FBA. You have to be really, really careful with the storage fees and the shipping fees, and it's hard to thread the needle in my experience. So we're usually recommending FBM for oversized items.
Great. And for any of your clients, have you launched outside of US, for example, in the EU marketplaces? So could you give us a case study or any example that you have done?
Yeah, so we have managed in the EU before. It's a challenge, there's a lot more nuances to it. Canada is easy. Like from going Canada to the US is not that big of a deal. But yeah, trying to go from the US into the EU has a lot more challenges. Really, the compliance burden, from the brand is like one of the biggest things, right? Having the responsible person and all these, following all the different regulations. But it does have advantages if you could bring over the reviews that you have from one marketplace to another. It could be like a really nice head start.
Great. And in terms of traffic, do you normally look into getting external traffic to Amazon, to attribution link, for example? And if you're doing it, which all platform do you recommend? And like social media, any of the social media platform that you normally recommend?
Yeah, it depends. Like for our own brands, like we're doing outside traffic. Some of our clients are just like really Amazon only. So, the most common it'd be like, Facebook or TikTok, or, some spillover maybe from Google going to their website that's spilling over. But I would call out a very easy way to get outside traffic is affiliate. So a few affiliate platforms that I would recommend to explore. One is the Amazon Creator Connections, which is right inside Amazon. Easy to use, easy to set up. Another is Wayward. Wayward is very, very simple to set up. And same with Levanta. What you're mostly doing on these platforms is, you're submitting your brand, you're submitting the commission that you're willing to pay in the event of a sale, and then you're submitting your eligible products. So the nice thing about affiliate is, like I just said, you're only paying in the event of a sale, which is different from the other advertising platforms, because on, Facebook, for example, you need to run ads and hope for a sale that, may or may not be successful.
True, true, true. And you mentioned about some of your clients they only sell on Amazon mainly. So for those clients, do you recommend any other sales channel? Like it might be Walmart or eBay, Etsy, depending on the category they are selling. Do you recommend? It's good to have, right? Instead of putting one egg in one basket.
I think it depends. There's some things that do okay on Walmart, but there's a lot of things that it's not worth the complicating your operations, right? I know for my own products, like we started selling on Walmart, we ended up stopping because it just wasn't enough volume. eBay is, yeah, I think it's hard to get the volume. Like Etsy, if you have something that is like handmade, maybe you could add 10 or 15% to your volume. We don't manage those things. I wouldn't advise somebody against it. A lot of the issue is a lot of times they don't have the scale, quite frankly. Yeah, and in terms of like Shopify, driven by Facebook ads or Google ads, it works for some brands. It doesn't work for other brands. I think the most important part is having a high enough LTV to make that work, right? To make outside traffic work. A lot of Amazon sellers are selling very price competitive products and they don't have a big enough catalog to make these channels work. Because like, for example, on Facebook, the typical cost of acquisition might be like $50 that you have to pay to acquire a new customer. And so Amazon sellers are looking at that. They're like, I'm going to lose money on this. This is not good, And so that's why sometimes you see Shopify brands like are more premium priced, right? And it is definitely a challenge to have success in both, but it's definitely possible.
Great, great. Yeah, you mentioned about the Amazon brings the customer to the seller, right? It's very hard for Shopify to get the same customer. The cost of acquisition is different.
Yeah, totally different. Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem on Amazon, you can't really build a brand. Is people don't search for unless you are a big brand like Anchor or Ugreen, big brand. But for a normal medium-sized business, people don't tend to go after brand, right? So in that case, what are the things that you are doing to make sure that people tend to buy again from you if it's a consumable, for example?
Yeah. So if you're an Amazon only brand, the only way you're going to have success is if you're ranking on those categorical search terms, right? Because people are not going to, they're discovering you from some search term. So that's going to be like the basis of your business for sure is the search terms. But like if you can, I feel like build a brand as an Amazon brand, if your product quality and experience is really, really good, right, then they'll come back and buy from you, right? So at first, they didn't search for the brand, but they'll come back. And so we do see some of our like Amazon only brands, they do still have branded search, even though they're not advertising on Facebook or Google, which can only be from like repeat customer. But the other things that could happen is if you're in like retail, for example, right? So someone might see it somewhere and then search on Amazon, right? So things like that, where people might see it outside and then come search.
You mentioned about you have four phases, right? So, for a buyer, it means for a seller who are selling items, a consumer, for example, how do you retarget them? We have sub and save on Amazon. Do you use any other techniques to retarget them?
Through the pay-per-click, there is retargeting ads available through pay-per-click. And so you can use those. But I would say, yes, subscribe and save is probably the best tool to do that. You can also add a subscribe and save only coupon that can help with that. So that's what I would recommend to try to, like, if you're thinking about PPC in terms of brand building, that would probably be the best way to achieve.
Yeah, that's a good point, adding a coupon, because it was a hack in one of those series. And they mentioned that if you do that, the amount will go by 3x or something instead of a normal 1x, right? So it have a big impact on that. And my last question is that we have a lot of AI happening, a lot of AI. Everything when you look around, it's AI. So what's your best AI automation that you have implemented within your company?
Yeah, so I mean, we're using AI for the listing optimization process, right? We're using it through Data Dive, and we're using it on our own with the image ideation. So we'll do ideation with AI, right? You provide the AI with your target avatar, like information about the product. It will get the images to like maybe 90% of the way there. And then you just need a graphic designer to touch it up. So we're using Chat GPT. Now we're more so using the Nano Banana for that one. We use like the AI even inside Data Dive for the initial writing of the listing, but then we'll tweak that. Like our copywriter will tweak those things. I would say, yeah, those are like the main things right now is like listing. Also now like video, right? With VO3.
Yeah.
Right now we have Sora that just came out.
Yeah.
So now we can start using those for like actual videos, which is like really exciting for product videos. So I'd say it's mostly right now the creative side of the business is using AI the most. And then, yeah, we just use it for, general problem solving for our VAs, right? So our team of VAs around the world, like they're skilled, they're all like knowledgeable in their area of work, but encouraging them to use AI and to like just empowering them to use AI on a regular basis, like makes them so much better, right? So sometimes there's a gap even in communication. Like for example, our operation manager, logistics manager, if they're trying to negotiate with like a supplier or something like that, being able to give them Chat GPT so they can like just make their negotiations just a lot more effective. Like it's really a tool to bridge the gap between like a full Western skill set to what they have. It really bridges the gap.
That's great. John, thanks a lot for sharing all those knowledge that you have done. You are very knowledgeable, to be honest. I can say that with 100%. And thanks a lot for sharing all those like knowledge bombs, I will say.
My
and
pleasure.
For the viewers, where can they find you?
So you can come to our website, onlinebrandgrowth.com. And if you want to connect with me, you could just schedule a free strategy session. If we have a good fit, we could do a full account audit of your Amazon account or your Google account. And you could also just DM me on any of the socials, whether it's X or LinkedIn or Facebook. Just reach out to me. Happy to connect.
Great. So I will put all the links in the show notes. So please do check it out. There'll be a LinkedIn profile and the website details for the strategy call. So you can find all the links down in the description. Please do check it out. Thanks again, John, for your time. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Sebastian. I appreciate it. And it's been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for having me on.
Likewise. Thank you.